There comes a moment in every empath's life when something inside them goes completely silent. Not broken, not angry, just done. Carl Jung discovered this wasn't depression, it wasn't emotional exhaustion, it wasn't weakness. He called it the final stage of spiritual awakening. And it terrifies everyone who witnesses it, because when an empath stops caring, they don't become cruel, they become untouchable. And that changes everything. Jung spent decades studying the patients who reached this state. And what he found challenges everything we think we know about empathy, spirituality, and what it actually means to be human. The moment the empath stops caring isn't the end of their journey, it's the beginning of something far more powerful than anything they ever gave away. But before we understand why empaths reach that edge, we need to understand what pushes them there, because most people never see it coming, not even the empaths themselves. Jung documented a pattern so consistent across his most sensitive patients that it became almost mechanical in its precision. These weren't people who occasionally felt things deeply. These were individuals whose entire nervous system was wired as an emotional receiver, a signal tower for everyone around them. They walked into a room and immediately absorbed the psychological atmosphere. Not consciously, not by choice. It just happened, like breathing. Family dinners left them drained because they were processing every unspoken tension in the room simultaneously. Friendships exhausted them because they carried both sides of every conflict, even when no one asked them to. Romantic relationships nearly destroyed them because they felt their partner's pain more intensely than the partner themselves ever did. Jung called them the emotional shock absorbers of their social systems. And here's what made his observations so disturbing. These empaths didn't just empathize with suffering, they absorbed it, they processed it, they transmuted it so others could function. Parents dumped their unresolved anxiety onto them. Siblings used them as free therapists. Partners treated them like emotional support animals who existed solely to manage moods and soothe feelings that were never theirs to carry. And the empaths accepted it. They accepted it as purpose, as destiny, as proof that their sensitivity meant something. They believed their gift obligated them to sacrifice their own peace for everyone else's comfort. They wore their exhaustion like a badge of honor, proof they were good people, proof they cared enough to suffer. The cultural conditioning ran deeper than anyone realized. From childhood, these individuals had been praised for being understanding, for making others feel better, for keeping the peace when chaos threatened to break through. Every single time they suppressed their own needs to accommodate someone else, they received validation. Every time they swallowed their anger to prevent conflict, someone told them they were mature beyond their years. This positive reinforcement created a pattern of self-abandonment that felt indistinguishable from virtue. And it was invisible. That's what made it so dangerous. But Jung noticed something the empaths themselves could not see. Behind their compassionate facade, their psyche was keeping records. Every manipulation, every betrayal, every moment someone exploited their kindness and walked away without a second thought. The empath's unconscious mind wasn't absorbing these experiences randomly. It was cataloging them with surgical precision, building a map no one knew existed. Consider someone who spent 15 years managing their family's dysfunction. They knew exactly which words would trigger their mother's guilt trips. They understood the precise emotional sequence their father used to dodge accountability. They could predict almost to the minute when a sibling would manufacture a crisis just to pull attention back to themselves. They had charted every psychological game being played around them with the accuracy of someone who'd been studying the terrain their entire life. But here's what Jung found most remarkable. Despite possessing this knowledge, they never weaponized it, not once, not even when they had every reason to. They just kept absorbing, kept caring, kept giving, until something fundamental inside them began to fracture. Their consciousness had become a detailed archive of everyone else's patterns, every weakness, every manipulation tactic, every emotional landmine, while their own needs remained buried so deep beneath layers of service and sacrifice that they had almost forgotten those needs existed. This created what Jung identified as a dangerous psychological split. On the surface, the empath appeared functional, even admirable, thriving in their role as the person everyone leaned on. But beneath that surface, something toxic was building. Resentment. Not the kind you could name or express or release. Unconscious resentment. The kind that seeps into your sense of self until you can no longer tell where you end and your bitterness begins. The breaking point always came from betrayal. Not simple disappointment. Not a minor slight. Not an honest mistake. Profound betrayal. From someone the empath had protected, defended, loved unconditionally, given years of their life to.
Carl Jung documented this trigger across dozens of cases and identified it as the single catalyst that forces what he called shadow integration, the moment the entire structure collapses. The story repeats with disturbing consistency. Someone discovers their partner's infidelity after years of managing that partner's emotional instability, depression, and anxiety, years of holding everything together while being quietly destroyed from the inside. The adult child learns their parent has been speaking about them behind their back with venom and cruelty after decades of being the family's emotional glue, the one who kept the peace, the one who made it work. The friend discovers devastating lies after years of carrying that person's darkest secrets and offering unconditional support through every crisis they manufactured. What made these betrayals so devastating wasn't just the act itself. It was the empath's sudden, shattering recognition that they had seen the warning signs all along. Their intuition had screamed the truth for months, sometimes years. A gut feeling they couldn't shake, a voice inside them whispering what was really happening, and they had silenced it. They had chosen to believe the best in someone who was showing them clearly and repeatedly exactly who they were. They had betrayed themselves to maintain their fantasy of who others could become. This self-betrayal cut deeper than anything the other person had done, because the empath realized in one terrible moment of clarity that they had participated in their own exploitation. They had dismissed their own instincts, overridden their own boundaries, ignored their own pain, all to maintain relationships that were quietly consuming them. The anger they felt wasn't just toward the betrayer, it was toward themselves, for allowing it, for staying long after every sign told them to leave. And that realization shattered something that could never be rebuilt. Not their heart, their illusions. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections. The empath had spent their entire life projecting goodness onto people, potential, innocence, hope. They had been seeing not who people actually were, but who the empath desperately needed them to be. When those projections finally collapsed, something extraordinary happened. The empath didn't cry. They didn't rage. They didn't fall apart the way everyone around them expected. Instead, they went quiet, unnaturally calm. Their eyes changed, not with tears, but with a clarity that made people uncomfortable to look at. The fog lifted, and for the first time in their entire life, they saw reality without the distortion of desperate hope. If this is hitting you right now, if you feel this in your chest, comment "I am done" below, because what comes next is where everything shifts. Jung described this moment as one of the most psychologically chilling transformations he ever witnessed in his entire clinical career. The empath stopped performing emotional labor. They stopped managing other people's feelings. They stopped explaining, justifying, apologizing for needs that were always legitimate. And they didn't announce it. They didn't post about it. They didn't send long messages explaining their new boundaries to everyone who had ever taken advantage of them. They simply stopped participating in the dysfunctional systems they had been holding together. The effect was immediate, and it was devastating to everyone around them. Family members who had relied on this person to mediate every conflict suddenly had to face each other directly, without a buffer, without someone smoothing over the sharp edges. Partners who had used the empath as an emotional crutch discovered that the familiar dance no longer worked. The buttons they had been pressing for years produced no reaction. Friends who had treated them as an always available, always patient therapist encountered something they had never encountered before from this person: a boundary. And here's what made this transformation genuinely terrifying to the people around them. The empath wasn't angry. If they had been angry, that would have been manageable, familiar, something people could negotiate with, apologize around, and eventually dissolve back into the old pattern. They knew how to handle the empath's anger because it always ended the same way, with forgiveness, with resumed caretaking, with the empath putting everyone else's comfort back at the center. This wasn't anger. This was indifference, complete, profound indifference to the emotional games that had controlled them for years. People tried everything. They manufactured crises. They played the victim. They called. They texted. They showed up at the door. Nothing worked. The empath had unplugged from the emotional matrix entirely. They watched these attempts with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing behavior they had predicted in a controlled experiment. Jung identified this as the integration of the shadow. Every empath carries a shadow self they have been taught, conditioned, and trained to deny their entire life. The part of them that is selfish, that prioritizes their own needs, that says no without explanation, that refuses to save people from the consequences of their own choices. Society told them this shadow was evil. Religion told them selflessness was the highest virtue. Cultural narratives celebrated endless sacrifice as nobility. Family systems rewarded their self-abandonment with love and praise. But Jung understood something most people never grasp about the shadow. It wasn't evil. It was the empath's survival instinct, their psychological immune system, the part of them designed at the deepest biological level to protect them from being consumed by other people's dysfunction. When the betrayal finally forced them to face this shadow, something remarkable happened. They didn't become cruel, they became complete. The selfish shadow merged with a compassionate light, and what emerged was something society had never prepared for and had no framework to understand. An empath who could feel everything, but chose consciously where to direct that feeling. An empath who saw through manipulation instantly, but no longer felt compelled to pretend they didn't. An empath who loved deeply, fiercely, powerfully, but only those who had earned access to that love through reciprocity, through respect, through showing up. This is what Jung meant by the final stage of spiritual awakening. Not transcending the ego, not becoming detached from the world, not rising above human feeling, integrating every part of yourself into conscious, deliberate choice. The empath had spent their entire life pouring themselves into others. Now, for the first time, they were learning to pour that same intensity back into themselves. This wasn't selfishness, this was self-preservation, finally being honored as sacred. The energy shift was immediate and unmistakable. Where the empath had once radiated warmth indiscriminately, warmth that anyone could take, drain, and walk away from, they now emanated something entirely different. Not coldness, consciousness. They no longer leaked emotional energy to anyone who demanded it. Their presence felt different, grounded, solid, impenetrable in a way that made people instinctively adjust how they approached them. Jung called this state selectively empathetic, and this selectivity looked like cruelty to the people who had never earned their care. The empath stopped responding to manipulative texts immediately. They let phone calls from energy vampires go unanswered. They said no, cleanly and without guilt, to requests that once would have sent them into a spiral of people-pleasing anxiety. They stopped attending family gatherings that left them emotionally devastated for days afterward. They ended friendships that had always been one-sided. They walked away from people they had spent years trying to save, people who had never deserved to be saved by them in the first place. But here's what the outside observers completely missed. The empath hadn't stopped caring about these people. They had stopped caring about maintaining relationships that required them to destroy themselves to sustain. They had stopped caring about being liked by people who had never truly valued them. They had stopped caring about keeping the peace in systems that were built entirely on their silent suffering. And the empath finally understood a truth that Jung had spent decades trying to teach. You cannot love others well until you love yourself first. Not the performative self-love of social media, not the shallow self-care of bubble baths and positive affirmations, the deep, unshakable self-respect that absolutely refuses to participate in your own destruction. This was the foundation that had always been missing, the crack in the structure that had let everything else crumble. In the workplace, this transformation was impossible to ignore. The person who had once absorbed everyone's stress, mediated every office conflict, and quietly carried the emotional weight of an entire team simply stopped doing all of it. They completed their work excellently, thoroughly, without complaint, but they no longer took on responsibilities that weren't theirs. They no longer smoothed over conflicts between other adults who were perfectly capable of addressing their own problems. They remained professional, pleasant even, but completely, utterly impenetrable to the emotional manipulations that had derailed them for years. Managers who had quietly relied on this person to do the work of 3 people suddenly faced someone who worked their hours, did their job, and went home. The entire dynamic shifted because the empath had removed themselves from the role of universal emotional dumping ground, and no one had realized how much of the workplace's functioning depended on that role until it disappeared. In family systems, the shift was even more dramatic. The person who had always hosted the holidays, who had mediated every family feud, who had absorbed decades of dysfunction and kept smiling through all of it, that person stopped performing those functions entirely. Not with confrontation, not with dramatic announcements or long, tearful conversations about boundaries. They simply became unavailable for the roles they had been unconsciously assigned since childhood. Parents who had treated them as emotional support encountered a polite but firm wall. Siblings who had exploited their generosity encountered limits they had never seen before. Extended family members who had taken them completely for granted faced a version of this person they did not recognize. Someone who smiled politely but refused to engage with drama. Someone who loved from a distance rather than drowning in proximity. Someone who said, "That doesn't work for me," and meant it, and didn't apologize for meaning it. The family responded the way families always respond when someone stops enabling dysfunction, with shock, with accusations, with questions loaded with guilt. How could you be so selfish? What happened to you? You've changed. And the empath would simply nod, because yes, they had changed. They had finally stopped setting themselves on fire to keep everyone else warm. The most profound shift, though, happened in romantic relationships. Empaths who reached this stage either transformed their partnerships into something genuinely healthy, or they ended them without the usual agony that had defined every relationship they had ever been in. Partners who had relied on the empath's endless, seemingly bottomless forgiveness suddenly faced accountability for the first time. Behaviors that had been tolerated, excused, and absorbed for years were no longer acceptable. The empath stopped explaining why certain things hurt them. They simply removed themselves from situations that violated their peace. Some partners rose to meet this. They recognized, sometimes painfully, that they had been taking advantage of someone extraordinary, and they chose, deliberately and with effort, to become worthy of that person. These relationships evolved into something neither person had ever experienced before: genuine equality, mutual respect, partnership that didn't require one person to bleed for the other to feel loved. Other partners couldn't adapt. They missed the version of the empath who had absorbed everything, who had managed their emotions, who had asked for nothing and given everything. When they realized that version was gone, truly gone, and no amount of manipulation could bring it back, they left. And the awakened empath let them go, without the usual devastation, without weeks of grief and second-guessing, without wondering if they should have tried harder or stayed longer or been more understanding. They recognized the departure for exactly what it was: protection, not loss. Jung observed this indifference caused a specific kind of panic in the empath's social circle, not because the empath had become mean or vindictive or cold, because their absence revealed the truth about everything that had come before. Family systems that had appeared functional for years fell apart without the empath holding them together. Friendships that felt deep and meaningful revealed themselves as entirely parasitic. Workplaces that had run smoothly descended into visible chaos without the empath's invisible labor keeping them afloat. The people who had benefited most from the empath's unconscious servitude suddenly understood, clearly and painfully, what they had lost. But by then, the empath had moved beyond caring about their realization. This wasn't revenge. The empath had no interest in making anyone suffer. This was sovereignty. The empath had finally learned that their gift was not meant to be handed out freely to anyone who demanded it. It was meant to be protected, guarded, shared only with those who valued it enough to reciprocate. Jung called this state psychologically invincible, not because nothing could hurt the empath anymore. They could still be hurt, they were still deeply, profoundly sensitive, but because they had integrated their capacity to feel everything with the wisdom to choose what to do with what they felt. They were no longer slaves to their own sensitivity. They had become its master. They could still sense others' pain, still read emotional atmospheres the way others read body language, still perceive truths that hadn't been spoken aloud. But these perceptions no longer controlled them. They no longer dictated their actions, consumed their energy, or determined the course of their relationships. They had become the conscious director of their own empathy. And this is where Jung's research revealed something both beautiful and deeply unsettling. These awakened empaths developed abilities that made them nearly impossible to manipulate. They could identify narcissists within minutes of meeting them, not because someone told them, not because they read about it online, because they felt it, the energy signature of someone who viewed other people as resources. It was unmistakable to them now. They recognized future faking before it could reach root. They saw through gaslighting for what it was the moment it began, instead of spending months or years believing they were losing their mind. Their integrated consciousness functioned as an automatic early warning system. But here's the part that disturbed Jung most. They didn't use these abilities as weapons. They could have. They possessed intimate knowledge of the vulnerabilities, fears, and psychological pressure points of everyone who had ever hurt them. They had years of data, years of observation, years of silent cataloging. They could have weaponized all of it. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives, quietly, cleanly, without drama, without confrontation, without giving those people the attention they craved. And they moved forward. Jung recognized that this restraint wasn't weakness, it was something far rarer. It was genuine disinterest in revenge, not suppressed anger, not moral obligation, a true, deep, settled lack of need to make anyone pay. They had become psychological masters, people who understood human nature at a level most individuals never even approach. And they chose, every single day, not to abuse that understanding. Instead, they used it to protect their peace and to help, selectively and consciously, the people who were genuinely ready to grow. This selective application of their gifts created what Jung called the empath's mirror effect. Their mere presence made inauthentic people uncomfortable. Manipulators felt exposed without the empath saying a single word. Energy vampires sensed instinctively that they could not feed here and moved on to easier prey. Meanwhile, authentic people felt something they had rarely felt around anyone: safe, truly seen without judgment, understood without explanation, valued without performance. The awakened empath became a living filter. Their consciousness automatically repelled dysfunction and attracted genuine connection. They didn't have to vet people anymore. Their integrated presence did it for them. Those who couldn't handle their clarity self-selected out. Those who valued authenticity moved closer, drawn by something they couldn't quite name but could feel unmistakably. The empath's entire world reorganized itself, not through effort, through energy. Jung documented how these empaths rebuilt their lives on entirely different foundations than the ones they had lived on before. They chose work that honored their sensitivity instead of exploiting it. Some became therapists, healers, coaches, people who could hold space for others' pain without absorbing it and being destroyed by it. Others became artists, writers, creators who channeled their extraordinary perception into work that moved people. Many sought careers that allowed solitude and autonomy, protecting their energy from the constant depletion that open-plan offices and endless meetings had caused for years. They built friendships based on reciprocity, on genuine mutual care, on the radical, almost revolutionary idea that a relationship should nourish both people involved, not just one. They entered romantic relationships as whole people, not as fixers, not as saviors, not as the person whose job it was to make someone else okay. They chose partners who valued their peace as much as they did, who understood deeply and genuinely that love does not require suffering to be real. Everything changed because they had finally learned to value themselves with the same ferocity they had once given away so freely to others. Their homes became sanctuaries, quiet, protected, intentional spaces that existed to restore them, not to serve everyone else. Their time became precious, not infinitely available to whoever needed them most urgently at any given moment. Their energy became sacred, deliberately directed, consciously shared. They understood in a way they never had before that protecting their inner peace wasn't selfish, it was necessary for their survival and for their ability to actually contribute to the world in meaningful ways instead of just being quietly consumed by it. The moment the empath stopped caring about maintaining peace in toxic systems became the moment they started caring deeply and fiercely about cultivating peace in their own soul. This was the ultimate act of self-love, not the kind that looks good on the surface, the kind that is built on the bone-deep recognition that their empathy, their extraordinary sensitivity, their ability to feel what others feel was a gift, an extraordinary, rare, powerful gift. And gifts of that magnitude deserve protection. They deserve boundaries. They deserve conscious direction. They were never meant to be bled dry. Jung understood this transformation as the birth of a sovereign individual, someone who had moved through unconscious empathy, through years of silent service, through betrayal and breaking, through the darkest moment of their psychological life, and emerged on the other side as something fundamentally different. Not harder, not colder, not damaged, whole. They no longer reacted to others' emotional demands. They responded. There is a difference, and it is everything. Every action became intentional. Every relationship became a choice. Every moment of care became something given from abundance rather than drained from an already empty well. The empath who stops caring about maintaining peace in toxic systems has started caring about cultivating peace in their own soul. They rejected the oldest, deepest lie they were ever told, that goodness requires suffering, that love demands self-abandonment, that being a good person means putting everyone else first, always, no matter what it costs you. That lie is over. The moment the empath stops caring isn't the end of their story, it's the beginning of their sovereignty. And that, more than anything else in this world, is what we desperately need more of. Not empaths who sacrifice themselves endlessly, silently, without recognition or reciprocity. Empaths who have learned to wield their gifts consciously, powerfully, selectively, on their own terms. Welcome to your awakening. You earned this. Through every moment you suffered in silence, through every night you lay awake carrying pain that was never yours, through every morning you woke up and chose, again, to show up for people who never showed up for you. You earned every single moment of this freedom. And now, finally, you are free.